Hi and welcome to this week's Ask GMBN Tech. You ask us the tech questions and we get something resembling an answer from one of us. I guess you're rolling in first this week.
Yeah, we try. So hashtag Ask GMBN, which is instantly what you should be doing in the comments below if you want to ask us a question. Hey, Doddy, I've seen people use paint thinner on their chains and it cleans incredibly well, says L. Nicholas. My question are paint thinners safe on chains and do they damage frame paint? Thanks and more power. Thanks, L. Nicholas. I mean, does it damage frame paint? Let's tackle that one first. I mean, the clue might be a little bit in the title here in paint thinner. Yeah, that's not really something you want to get around your paint on your frame. It could strip it off or damage it or make it all bobbly. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get that anywhere near that. Also, I think paint thinner's a bit of a broad term because there's different types out there. There's kind of there's paint thinners, there's like spirits and alcohols. Some of them will have acid in them and some of them won't. The ones with acid are not going to be particularly friendly to any metal whatsoever, so you wouldn't want to get that near your chain, let alone anything else, which is why people make more bike-specific degreasers, so that they are definitely gentle on metals, definitely gentle on bike paint, and also, gentle on anything that you don't want to be stripping grease out of as well, and just sort of generally getting it around your bike. So yeah, I'd be careful with paint thinner and anything that's not bike specific. It would be my advice. I pretty much agree with that. I mean, people will always use household stuff because you've already got it and arguably can save money. I think if I was going to clean my chain with anything, I wouldn't use that for sure. I mean, I probably wouldn't mind using washing up liquid of all of them. Everyone's like, it's got salts in it, but like most bike cleaners have got salts and stuff in there. If you're really trying to avoid buying bike-specific products.
Or if you've just run out and you need to do something in the meantime. But yeah, I wouldn't use something that's quite as gnarly as that. It's not going to be very nice on your bike, is it? No, for sure. Next question. Modern geometries of mountain bikes tend to have a steeper seat angle in order to be more efficient climbers. However, when fitting your saddle, you will move it forward or backwards to a position where your knee is vertically aligned with the pedal shaft in the horizontal position of the cranks. What would leave you is essentially the same position over the bottom bracket, no matter what the angle is. Are the steep seat tube angles just a marketing claim? All right, well, let's think about this a little bit differently. So you are assuming, by writing this, that people will actually move their saddles to those positions. A lot of people won't. So let me just make a comparison between two styles of bike here. So a cross-country bike, many cross-country bikes have a seat angle of around 74 degrees. And it's a universal angle that seems to work pretty well on that style of bike, given the geometry, the wheelbase of the bikes. It makes for a good seated position, it makes for a good stood position, it makes for an easy transition between them. But yet, the taller the rider you are, the further backwards, obviously, your saddle is going to get, so you might end up running the seat forwards to try and return that position. On these new modern mountain bikes you're referring to, we're using Enduro bikes as the example, and yeah, they do tend to have much steeper seat angles from 76 degrees onwards, some of them nearly as steep as 80 degrees. I think you might be sort of missing the point a bit here. It's not just about the sat down position when you're on the flat, it's about climbing steeper terrain. Think of those bikes more as winching up a steep hill so you can ride back down the steep stuff, yeah? Rather than a cross-country bike where you're riding on a variety of terrain. It's more about an efficient position. The cross-country seat angle is going to be more efficient for more universal style of riding, whereas the steeper seat angles, when you pitch it back up the hill, it's going to put you basically back into that bottom bracket position where you really want your weight to be. That's really what it's focused on. And of course, the steeper seat angle has to be on the bike, the longer the front centre of the bike is accordingly, and the rest of the bike, which you're not going to get on a cross-country bike. So it is all about relation. But that said, you're going to get some bikes out there that have a steeper seat angle than they perhaps need for their intention. You got any experience in the seat angles?
Yeah, I mean, I like steeper on my Enduro for sure because, well, for starters, it's a nice climbing when you sort of winch and plummet and you're not riding single track.
Winch and plummet, that's what I should have said. Yeah.
It is nice to be like really far forward for a climb. But also when you're descending, the saddle's kind of out your way, especially if you're off the back and for steeps and whatnot. I find it's kind of out the way, which you can't really get just from moving your saddle forward by a couple of centimetres,
it's not quite
which
the same,
is all your rails kind of give you. But also I'd want to pick the frame that was right for me and then still have that fore and aft on the saddle. Especially as a short rider, I've got shorter legs, shorter thighs, which means I do need to move my saddle as far forward as possible to get my pedaling position right.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of want the frame to be right from the starters and not, be messing around with the rails.
Yeah, but I mean, back to the original question, it's not just a marketing thing. A steep seat angle on a mountain bike that's got a lot of wheel travel is a really good thing, because it's going to help you climb that bike much easier up the sort of terrain that you need to get it up to have fun on the way back down. That's not to suggest it's a bike that's going to be amazing for doing a cross-country marathon ride, regardless of the wheel travel, because the angle is biased to climbing, not necessarily sat in a saddle on a flat.
Yeah.
I think that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, winch and plummet.
Yeah, winch and plummet, yeah. Cut me down again.
So Jack McKenzie has given us a hashtag AskGMBN. Hey Doddy, what about Hey Anna here? Come on, guys.
So these are questions from about a week before you started.
All right, I'll let you off, Jack. So hey Doddy, all MTB categories are continuing to innovate and get better, but dirt jumpers haven't changed much in the past 10 years. Do you think dirt jumpers could get better? I think it's a bit harsh to say they haven't changed in the last 10 years. We're still seeing dirt jump bikes coming out from Scott, Cube, GT, Marin. They're all bringing out, year on year, still bringing out models. But Canyon have just dropped the stitched range, so they've got a brand new hardtail. This is 2022, brand new hardtail and a full sus dirt jump bike. Cannondale also released Dave, their sort of mates dirt jump bike that sort of does everything, bit of pump track, bit of dirt jumping. And that was just released.
His dog was called Dave, and he was shouting, true story, he was like, Dave, come here. And everyone in the park was over, and his dog comes like plodding over.
Yeah, well, it's a weird name for a bike, for sure.
Human names for bikes and animals is amazing.
Do you not name your bikes? I do, all the time. But yeah, so they've just dropped brand new dirt jump bikes. And, I think people like Sam Pilgrim and Matt Jones, they're in the limelight a lot at the moment, and they're getting new dirt jump bikes. So I don't think there's any sort of light has dimmed in the last 10 years. People are looking at them, they are developing them. Just maybe we don't see it in the press as much because it's not as popular as
it's a bit more fringe, I guess, isn't it? I think it used to feel like dirt jump bikes and the sort of riding you were doing them would be your entrance to mountain biking, but now it feels like it's developed, with the slope style and different aspects there. It's almost like it's a fringe sport within the sport.
Yeah, but I've got to say there's a lot of attention on slopestyle at the moment. It's all growing, especially with crankworks, and dual slalom as well is forcing people to build bikes that kind of look like full sus dirt jump bikes, and I just think that's probably going to make people look at them a bit more, maybe want them a bit more. So who knows, in the next 5 years maybe we'll see all the big manufacturers doing more slopestyle or dirt jump bikes to sort of meet that light. But I've got to say, I don't think people have not developed them. It's still happening.
It's still moving. Yeah, I mean, maybe no. We'll leave it there. There's too much to
What do you
about.
think? Let us know in the comments below.
Right, next question from Sam Owen. I've got a RockShox Super Deluxe rear shock, and when I was riding, I could feel some knocking in the shock and oil was bubbling out the top of it. What do you think has happened to it? Well, it's broken, clearly. But seriously, where was the oil bubbling out? It's not a RockShox Super Deluxe, but there's a shock here to talk about. Where are we talking about the oil coming out? Was it coming out of this part of the shock? Because if it was, the actual, I don't think I can undo that one. Yeah, the actual sleeve might have been undone slightly, and there could have been some damper oil leaking out. More to the point, the oil should not be leaking out of your shock. Now, you say it's bubbling. So when oil bubbles, what tends to happen is the air is mixed into the oil internally. So I don't know if you can see it in here, if I can press that slightly. So, in fact, there's the IFP there. That's what I was trying to show you. You have air on one side of that and oil on the other side. If the air gets into the oil, it cavitates and bubbles. But as for the oil coming out of the shock, God knows. I think you're going to have to go and get that repaired. That's not good. Go and get that repaired. You do not want to be riding with a broken shock, especially not a good shock like that. It could be as simple as just something's loose or an O-ring perhaps become dislodged on the inside. Get it looked at, I'd say.
So Connor Birchall has asked us, I've recently come across a 2014 Fox 36 UCI World Champs Edition fork. I did some research and found out it was one of 200. Are there demand for these kinds of products? Well, I don't know specifically about that fork and whether it's sort of a niche, high demand kind of fork, but generally parts are only worth what someone's willing to pay for them. I always say, if they're in demand, parts are pretty scarce at the moment, and I know there's still a lot of people riding 26 out there. So forks are still retailing secondhand about £200 to £300 here in the UK, which is pretty decent for something that comes from circa 2014. But in terms of like a niche product that might be vintage, I guess it depends what the story is with that fork and what someone's willing to buy, whether it's specific to their project or whether it's specific to a memory or whether they particularly like that. So I think you'd have to do a bit more research into sort of niche forks of that year to find out
it's a hard one to
what
say,
it's worth. But it is, like I always say, it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
My inkling, just because, you're saying it's 1 in 200 pairs of those forks. If you don't immediately need cash, I'd just sit on them for a bit, because chances are you might find someone on one of those like vintage Facebook websites, fan page groups that wants to build a bike of that era, and that might just be the product for that. So if you can afford it, I'd keep hold of it a bit, because I don't think you're going to lose any money on it. And just selling it now, if you only get a few £100 for it, might not be worth it. I think we've got one last question. I think this one's aimed towards you, but I'm going to read it anyway.
Oh, was it?
My bike seems to shift up correctly. I want to shift down the cassette from 50 down to 24. It seems to shift poorly, but it shifts again correctly from 21 to the smallest sprocket. I can't identify what's causing the problem. Is it a bent derailleur hanger or a loose cassette? Well, it could be a few things there. There's a lot of things it could be. If your cassette is loose, I mean, you would know that by looking at a cassette, and the fact you've even suggested it suggests you know about that. So I would check that. I would also check your axle on there as well. Visibly, you can check your derailleur hanger, so put the bike in the smallest sprocket, make sure your derailleur and the hanger line up completely. The same with it at the biggest sprocket, and then straight away you're taking anything out of the equation. In theory, you should basically get in the way. Then reset your limit screws and re-index stuff. I mean, there's a lot. Do you want to add anything on there?
Well, if he's saying that it's shifting fine up into the bigger cogs, so the lower gears at the back, but it's not coming down, that just makes me think there's too much tension on the inner cable. So maybe check your barrel adjuster. Is it wound? So when you're looking down your handlebar at the gear shifter, you've got the dial, which is your barrel adjuster. If you wind it all the way clockwise, that's basically taking the tension off the inner cable. Try doing a couple of those and cycling through the gears, see if it makes it any better. If it's already wound all the way clockwise and there is too much tension on the cable, you might need to just release that at the derailleur end and just go through the gears again and start indexing it again. Because basically you can add tension by going anti-clockwise with the barrel adjuster, but you can't go any further once it's wound all the way back in. So
that's absolutely right, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my thought. If it's working or going up into the bigger gears at the back but not coming back down, it's probably too much tension in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one other thing that would go along exactly with that, is if there's too much B tension on there. So your B tension is, imagine if the derailleur is on your bike, it deals with the height of this upper sprocket in relation to the biggest sprocket on a cassette. And if the gap is too big, sometimes the derailleur will get stuck there when trying to shift back down. It won't always shift down. And that's just that screw. So you can literally play with that one on its own. But you'll still need to make sure the gears are indexed and tensioned correctly for it to work. They all kind of work together. But yeah, process of elimination, really.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Let us know what it was so we know for future.
Yeah, and as always, get your questions in the comments underneath. If you've got any direct questions for myself or Anna, let us know in the comments. Use a hashtag for question for Anna only, or the same for Doddy, or Ask GMBN Tech, and we'll come back to you hopefully on a show soon. And we'll see you in the next one. See you later.